monarchs rule. One of the most famous species of butterflies in North America might be making a comeback, and it's happening in one of the insect's native habitats in Mexico. The Reuters news agency reports that the migratory monarch has seen an 85% decline in numbers since the 1990s. The International Union for Conservation of Nature currently lists it as a vulnerable species. But that's a step up from its endangered status in 2022. And the Mexican government official says in the season spanning 2024 and 2025, an area where the butterflies hibernate doubled. That's a hopeful sign for a species threatened by habitat destruction, pesticides that kill off an important food source, and environmental changes. The official credits international cooperation for helping change things for the better for one of Earth's most vibrant creatures. So good to have you watching a new edition of The World from A to Z. My name is Carl Azus. Before we get to our next topic on time, what day is it?
The day after daylight saving time begins is known as National Napping Day. It was established in 1999 to promote siestas and help people recover from lost sleep.
'Tis that famous or infamous time of year when the U.S. and some other countries move their clocks ahead 1 hour from standard time to daylight saving time. Unless you went to bed an hour earlier Saturday night, you were probably feeling that lost hour of sleep Sunday morning. The idea has been around for centuries, but the American practice officially started with the Standard Time Act of 1918. It established time zones and tried to conserve energy during World War I by timing nightfall to be an hour later. Daylight saving time came and went over the decades. It became permanent with the Uniform Time Act of 1966, though Arizona and Hawaii don't observe the changes. A lot of media reports criticize the switch, blaming it for lost productivity, disruption to circadian rhythms, even some vehicle accidents. So why do we still have it? Much of North America is north enough of the equator for daylight hours to get significantly longer in summer and shorter in winter. The time changes help keep the hour of sunrise closer to when people wake up. The U.S. has tried eliminating the changes before, switching to permanent daylight saving time in the early 1970s. But that made it so dark on winter mornings when people were going to work and school that it quickly became unpopular and the time changes resumed. Since then, lawmakers and those they represent haven't agreed on which time, standard or daylight saving, should be the permanent one, so falling back and springing forward remain part of our lives.
How does time move? Forward, backward, in a line, 3D? Turns out there's a lot of ways people view time. Albert Einstein's theory of relativity proposed that the passage of time is viewed differently depending on where you are and how fast you're going. But the language you speak, and oddly enough, which direction you read, affects how people view time. For example, English speakers read from left to right, so they typically view time as moving from left to right as well. But a Stanford University study found that Hebrew speakers, who read from right to left, view time as moving in that direction. Mandarin speakers read top to bottom, so they think of time vertically. For example, next week in Mandarin literally translates to down week.
Most languages, especially Western ones, view the future as being in front of us and the past as behind us.
In Swedish, the future literally translates to front time. But there are exceptions. The Aymara people in South America view the future as behind them because you can't see the future. That's the difference in direction, but the shape of time differs across languages too. While English and Swedish speakers tend to think of time as a line, Greek and Spanish speakers think of it as a three-dimensional shape. Instead of calling a span of time short or long, Spanish and Greek speakers would call it big or small. These small language differences often don't make a big difference in day-to-day life, but some do. In many languages, including English, speakers rely on future tense to talk about the future. But in other languages, the future tense doesn't even exist. You just say what you'll do and when you'll do it. The difference in how time is viewed also changes people's behavior. Some studies indicate that speakers who use future tense think of the future as more distant, and so they prepare less for it than speakers of languages without future tense. A 2018 Stanford experiment found that German-speaking kids were more likely to pass up a smaller reward and wait for a bigger prize than Italian-speaking kids. Now, no language, Italian, German, or otherwise, can control time or what we do with our time, but it does influence our way of thinking. Another reminder of the unique perspectives in different languages.
On this day in world history. Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you. Maybe not the most revolutionary words ever spoken, but they were the first ones ever spoken over a telephone. On March 10th, 1876, Alexander Graham Bell made his first successful test of the device he'd invented. Exactly 30 years later, tragedy struck at a mine in northern France. Workers at the Cochrier mine, named for the company that owned it, had tried to seal off and suffocate an underground fire. But flammable gas in the walls then caused a massive explosion that led to the deaths of almost 1,100 people. Though hundreds of others survived, the Cochrier disaster was the worst mining accident in European history. And this was the date in 1959 when people in Tibet revolted against the occupying forces of China. That communist country had invaded in 1950. It believed Tibet was a part of China and that its actions were justified. But Tibetans were afraid China would try to kidnap their spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama. So 300,000 of them surrounded his palace to protect and later evacuate him to India. China then attacked the palace and cracked down on Tibet, officially making it an autonomous region of China.
Word and knowledge. Tropical cyclones that form in the South Pacific are known as what? Typhoons, monsoons, cyclones, hurricanes. With the exception of monsoons, these are different names for the same type of storm. In the South Pacific, they're called cyclones.
Hundreds of thousands in eastern Australia were affected by a storm named Alfred. It was a Category 2 cyclone before it weakened and made landfall Saturday, leaving behind widespread flooding and wind damage. It hit a part of the country that's far enough south that it usually doesn't see cyclones. In the northern hemisphere, this would be like a hurricane hitting Delaware instead of Florida. The Australian states of Queensland and New South Wales bore the brunt of Alfred, with at least one death being blamed on the storm and more than 316,000 people losing power. Electricity companies said it could be days before that's back in all the impacted areas. Authorities reported that numerous rescues had been made.
This is no ordinary EF getaway. It's a gateway to personal travel, a deeper understanding of educational tours, and showing students the world. Enter now to win one of 20 spots on this free trip to Panama.
Been hearing from a lot of schools in Canada lately. Today we're visiting the province of Alberta, where Mr. Berrigan's class is watching from Heritage Heights School. It's in the community of Foothills. Stateside in the Pacific Wonderland of Oregon, we've got Miss Gertson's class with us from Portland. Hello to Benson Polytechnic High School. From Ohio, we welcome Mrs. Slezak's class, where the Eagles are flying over Findlay. Liberty Benton Middle School is there. And in Rogers, Arkansas, big hello to Mr. Reese's class. The Cougars are at Kirksey Middle School. How much would you pay for a Cheeto? Considering that a bag costs around $4, your answer probably isn't nearly as much as this one sold for. It was auctioned off for the flaming hot price of almost $88,000, and that's because it's shaped like a Pokemon. This Pokemon, Charizard. And someone decided, that makes Cheetozard worth the price of a luxury electric car. The snack bite is 3 inches long and comes with a Pokemon card. And if you're thinking, no Cheeto is so neato to meato that I'd Frito-Lay all that free dough on it, you're not the only one star bursting with Ruffles feathers who can't get Ori over the amount of Ritz someone would put on to planter 88,000 chips to can't catch a single Cheeto. It's nothing to Snickers about, y'all. I'm Carl Azus, getting hungry on the world from A to Z. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. You mean the world to me.